If we were to put our attention to learning mindfully what our body is trying to tell us, if we start to listen to the whispers that our body tells us, then when our body starts screaming, that's essentially what's happening. So many of us are going into that sympathetic zone for such a long time, to a point where we then have these thyroid conditions and autoimmunity issues and brain dysfunction and significant brain fog and challenges that we then can't overcome, or we are having so much trouble overcoming because we're just waiting for a diagnosis. We're waiting for somebody else to tell us what's wrong. Here's a great question for you. Who knows your body better than you? And the answer is nobody. You know your body better than anybody. I tell every single one of my patients that. I don't know your body better than you do. I need you to listen to your body. I need you to tell me what's going on, and I'm happy to help put the puzzle pieces together. But you're the one that's living in your body on a daily basis. So it really comes down to the conscious ability to mindfully and acutely listen to what your body is trying to say.
You're listening to Cleanse, Heal, Ignite podcast, and I'm your hostess, Diane Kaiser, functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, former pro soccer player, transformational leader, holistic healer, and life purpose coach, helping you and your business awaken to your full potential. We are a transformation tribe of visionaries empowering passion-quenching, heart-centered advice to wellness warrior leaders on self-love, nutrition, mindset, and divorcing perfectionism. Our mission is to help you laugh your way to a sexy belly, love your way to vitality, and live your life with purpose by sharing real talk and truth drops that will help you cleanse your body, heal your hormones, and ignite your life. Side effects of this podcast may include all-day energy, happy hormones, perfect poops, increased confidence, becoming your own best healer, and catching the self-love virus. There's currently no vaccination to protect you from this and no known cure. In most cases, listeners experience a strong desire to accept new challenges, ditch toxic people, follow their heart, and dance like no one's watching. If you experience moods happier than usual, live it unapologetically and share with your social media friends immediately. Wow. Well, this episode is packed full of root cause related information that I hope to inspire you. I brought on this doctor to talk about this one specific nerve that controls and regulates so many functions of the body. If you suffer with irritable bowel syndrome, obesity and weight gain, chronic fatigue, depression, irregular heartbeat, ulcers, weight loss, gastroparesis, chronic inflammation, epilepsy, and many, many other things, which feels like just chronic body pain, you'll want to listen to this entire episode. This one specific nerve has so many functions, such as in the brain, which controls anxiety and mood, and in the gut, it increases stomach acidity, gut flow, motility, and other digestive enzyme production. In the heart, it controls heart rate variability, heart rate and blood pressure. In the pancreas, it controls blood sugar balance and digestive enzyme production. In the liver, it controls bile production and detoxification through your kidneys. In the gallbladder, it controls bile release to help break down fats. In the kidneys, it promotes general function, including water balance, glucose control, sodium excretion, and other things which help control blood pressure. In the bladder, it controls voiding of urine. In the spleen, it helps to reduce inflammation. In the sex organs, it helps to control fertility and sexual pleasure, including orgasms. In the mouth and tongue, it helps to control ability to taste and saliva production through salivary gland control. In the eyes, it activates tear production through the glands. So this one nerve's health has the potential to help those suffering from various health conditions like anxiety, heart disease, many different kinds of cancers, poor circulation, leaky gut, Alzheimer's, memory and mood issues, migraines, headaches, fibromyalgia, obesity, tinnitus, addictions, autism, and autoimmune conditions. So how can we stimulate this one nerve to ensure that it's functioning optimally? Stick around through this entire episode to learn how. This is truly the root of so many of our issues, and is one of the biggest underutilized discussions in Western medicine today. This episode of Cleanse, Heal, Ignite includes a free gift to the lucky winner who leaves a review for the podcast, which is a solution that I personally handpicked to help you optimize this tone of the specific nerve we are talking about today. This specific parasympathetic essential oil blend is what I find to be one of the missing links that has helped thousands of people around the world bring their health back in balance and eliminate unwanted health symptoms like fatigue, depression, anxiety, migraines, inflammation, and extra weight gain. So by making it a part of your wellness ritual, you can enhance your body's ability to purge harmful toxins, eliminate digestive issues, boost nutrient assimilation and absorption, sharpen memory and focus, clear up paralyzing brain fog, calm the fires of incessant inflammation, and melt away anxiety and depression, and more. All you have to do is massage a small drop behind your earlobe to ignite your parasympathetic state. And as you're going to learn in this episode, this is where all of healing and health maintenance processes occur. Now, there are two ways to get your hands on this magical oil. Either enter to win by leaving a review in iTunes for Cleanse, Heal, Ignite podcast, or visit bit.ly/Chi Mood Oil. That's spelled bit.ly/CHI Mood Oil to grab your own bottle now. All this information is in the show notes. So if you go to dianekaiser.com, you will find all of these links so you can click on them and either leave a review or grab your own bottle ASAP. Without further ado, let's get into the show. Hey warriors, welcome back to another episode of Cleanse, Heal, Ignite, where we are on a mission here to help you understand the root causes that cause you to suffer with symptoms and sickness that you have no clue why it won't go away no matter all of your best efforts. So today we are going to talk about taking a trip to Las Vegas. Wait, no, it's closed right now. I'm kidding. We're not going to Vegas. We are going to take a journey inside of the body on the importance of what's called your vagus nerve, which, if you wonder what the vagus nerve is, we have Dr. Navaz Habib today to talk to you about the importance of this huge nerve that connects so many different pieces and parts of your body, and why it should be one of the most important things that you should be talking about today in your health, because many of you are out there and you are trying to fix this symptom, fix this condition that you were diagnosed with, or maybe you were told by someone you should take a supplement. And I think that we needed to really stop the madness and go back to the main things that are small hinges swinging huge doors. And I believe that the vagus nerve is that important for all of us. So thank you so much today for being here with us, Dr. Navaz. How are you?
I'm wonderful. It's my absolute pleasure, Diane. I'm excited to be here.
Me too. So I get to learn with you guys because the vagus nerve is something that I've talked about in my programs, and the importance of having really solid vagal tone, which is to say, this nerve that we're going to talk about on regulating so many parts of your body. But this guy is the expert on it. And I bought his book, which we'll talk about throughout this interview, but it didn't come before our interview, so bummer. But I do have a lot of different questions for him today that are going to be specifically relevant to each and every one of you. So stay to the end. Let's just start with this first very, very simple and straightforward question of what is this vagus nerve and why is it so important for us to focus on it? What does it control?
I love it. I think this is the first question to start with always, because we don't really know what it is. And it's not common knowledge. So the vagus nerve is by far the most important nerve in the body when it comes to optimal health and controlling inflammation. It is the 10th cranial nerve. So we have 12 pairs of cranial nerves that come out of our brainstem and that go to different parts of our head. But the vagus nerve is the only one that actually leaves the head and the cavity of the cranium. It actually leaves and it goes alongside two of the most important blood vessels in our body, the carotid artery and the jugular vein. So those are the arteries, those are the blood vessels that bring blood to the brain and back down from the brain. So you can just tell how important it is simply by looking at the anatomy. And what it controls is everything that it then connects to. It connects to the heart, to the lungs, to the stomach, the small intestine, the large intestine, the liver, the gallbladder, the kidneys, the spleen, you name it. Every organ in our abdomen, in our thorax, in our chest, every single organ is innervated by the vagus nerve. And that's just how important it is, that it is bringing all of this information, all of these details from those organs to the brain, and then from the brain back to those organs. And so it's really, really important in ensuring optimal health and optimal function.
So the functions, what does it control? So like if we were to specifically talk about if somebody had poor vagal tone, what might that look like for what different freeways that it has connections to?
Certainly. So let's start with the heart very simply. the first connection generally that we notice, that it goes to the heart to actually slow down the heart rate, to keep it at that normal number of kind of 50 to 65 that we want to optimally be in. If that heart rate level is too high, it's because the vagus nerve is a little bit weaker. It's not actually getting great information to the heart to slow it down. The heart on its own would beat at about 100 beats per minute if we didn't have any vagus nerve control. So the higher that heart rate creeps towards that 100, 110, 120 potentially even, because we have the opposite control coming from the sympathetic nerves, then what we then have is low vagal tone. In the lungs, it's not directly affecting the lungs, but it's actually directly affected by our breath and our diaphragmatic function. So are we breathing correctly? Are we allowing the diaphragm to move up and down and allow the vagus nerve to work correctly? In the stomach, it controls stomach acid production. It links to the intrinsic factor release, so we can actually absorb vitamin B12 in our stomach and from our stomach. It allows peristalsis and the migrating motor complex to work in the small intestine and the large intestine. So if people are dealing with constipation or diarrhea, anybody with IBS or inflammatory bowel disease, vagus nerve is going to be affected there for sure. Liver function, detoxification pathways, biotransformation issues, specifically if you have trouble with modulating hormones, for example, or if you have an autoimmune condition because of a leaky gut in the stomach, these are all linked to vagus nerve function. In addition to that, we have diabetes because it's linked to pancreatic function and the ability to produce insulin according to the blood sugar balance in being measured in the liver. And so the information that's being passed between all of those organs to the brain and back from the brain down to those organs is being passed through what I call the information superhighway of the body, which is the vagus nerve.
Wow. So this sounds like someone who's going through to a doctor, like a gastrointestinal doctor, and there's so many people now who have IBS, and I mean chronic constipation in my practice. And I work with exclusively women in my practice, and then the men that are loved ones of maybe husbands, partners, children, but mainly women. And I see now more than ever, I've been doing functional medicine lab testing for about 8 years now, and I have never seen it so bad that they're codependent on laxatives. And this is what I want to share with you today too, is that 13 out of the last 15 GI panels that we've done, and for those of you listening, if you listen to a few episodes back, myself and Dr. Seth Gerlach talked about GI symptoms, GI issues, and the importance of going deep into GI mapping and understanding what gut bugs that you might have, but not just infection, but inflammation and intolerances, food intolerances, and imbalances of gut microbes, as well as any kind of massive infections. And the one that I've seen the most, and I've never seen this before in my practice, is this a chronic case. 13 out of 15 cases, with the exception of me, as one of my other clients, is one of them, had H. pylori, high levels of H. pylori. Yeah. And I know that's a stomach acid thing. So we've got H. pylori, which is a nasty gut bug in the stomach. And they've got a lot of other things too, like a lot of dysbiosis, more than I've ever seen, which means more bad bugs than good. So how can the vagus nerve be contributing to this? Because what we're doing in my practice, and what a lot of functional medicine doctors are doing, and what a lot of patients are doing, is we're taking all these, antimicrobials, we're taking probiotics, we're taking migrating motor complex supplements, we're taking laxative, we're doing whatever we can to get the system flowing. But what is the vagus nerve telling us in all of this? And what might we be missing in just doing supplementation and some, maybe even some visceral manipulation of, let's say, like a Mayan. I recommend a lot of Mayan massages to help women with that tone inside of their vaginal walls. Chiropractic adjustments. I mean, these are all things that I've seen many people do, including myself, but never really having addressed and considered how the vagus nerve might be the master controller of all of this.
Yes, absolutely. You're not the only one to see a lot of H. pylori on GI map tests, by the way. I think I have the second highest number of GI maps measured in Canada, and I've been seeing tons of H. pylori here as well.
Really, lately, more so than ever?
more so than ever.
Interesting.
And I believe actually the stats are about 70% of the population actually has H. pylori present.
It's gone up.
And it's significantly going up. And I do believe that about 20 to 30% of those people are highly symptomatic because of the H. pylori. So there certainly is a strong correlation between that and the constipation and kind of the levels of H. pylori that I'm even seeing over here recently as well.
Yeah. So what's that about? So I know that you say that the vagus nerve controls acid production. So, the way I always describe it is that acid production is top down. So if we don't have enough stomach acid, which hypochlorhydria has been going up more and more also, and I've been seeing as H. pylori also goes up. And so we've got this vagus nerve that controls either sympathetic dominant or parasympathetic, which the first is that we're in a state of fight or flight, which you probably follow the work of, what's his name, Dr. Bruce Lipton.
Of course.
70% of us are living in fight or flight. And that's that's that one side where we're driven in this state where we're stressed out all the time and that drops stomach acid. Then we've got the parasympathetic, which is where we're in rest and digest, breathe and feed. So what is the whole dynamic here that you're seeing? I mean, is it just because there's so many of us are living in fear, or what's the deal with why we're seeing such high levels of hypochlorhydria and H. pylori? And what does the mental emotional state have to say about this?
We have to remember that and what I've found in my practice, there's 4 different methods by which our body goes into sympathetic dominance and goes into a sympathetic way. And they're all different types of stress. So some type of stress is pushing you in that direction. Like I said, there's 4 different types. So we've got emotional, psychological, physical, and biochemical. And those are the 4 pathways by which stress increases within the body. And when we have that stress level increase, what happens is it pushes us further into that sympathetic dominant side. So we go into that fight and flight side rather than staying in the rest and digest parasympathetic side, which is controlled through the vagus nerve. So let's say, for example, and a really simple example, you sit down for a meal, okay? Most of us are sitting at a computer on a Zoom call doing work at a desk right now. And we're sitting there and we're grabbing our lunch and we're sitting there at our desk in front of our computer. This is a stressful environment for us. We are surrounded by our coworkers. We are making sure that our cameras are not watching us, and we're trying to pay attention to all of the important things that are going on in our world on the computer. And then we sit down in front of it at a stressful position, in a physically stressful position where we're normally in that scrunched forward position. So we've got emotional stress, we've got physical stress, and then we're then sitting there and there's biochemical stress because we're probably not choosing the healthiest foods to eat in addition to that. So what's then going to happen? We're eating under stress. When we eat under stress, we stay in that fight or flight side of things. So we don't actually allow information to be passed from the taste buds to the brain, processed, and then ideally sent through the vagus nerve to the stomach to produce stomach acid and to then break down the food that we are then producing. So if that doesn't happen, then we're not able to break that food down, chemically break those bonds, break down the protein into the amino acids, break down the carbs into glucose, break down the fats into the triglyceride and fatty acids. And if we can't break those down, then our pancreas can't do its job with the digestive enzymes that it's supposed to send out. Our gut microbes are not able to do their job because the food that's supposed to get to them, the fiber that they then are looking forward to receiving, are not broken down properly for them. So what happens? We start to get dysbiosis, because if this is happening on a consistent basis, these bacteria are shifting. And so the bad bacteria that are then eating the food that we aren't able to break down start to increase and increase and increase. And so we lead to this level of dysbiosis. And this is why we're seeing so many different people on the GI map having these high levels of overgrowth bacteria and autoimmune triggering bacteria and H. pylori and parasites that are really, really high. And then in addition to this, don't forget that what the vagus nerve is also controlling is peristalsis, is the movement of food along the small intestine and large intestine. And if we're not getting that control through the vagus nerve to come down and tell the intestines to move that food, then the food stays stuck and it doesn't move along. And so we're slowing that path by which we're trying to get stuff out. And this is why constipation and chronic constipation and IBS are becoming so much more common, because people are dealing with this because they're eating under stress and they're not allowing their bodies to go into that parasympathetic rest and digest state.
Mm-hmm. And also, I would imagine SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, because it's and SIFO, small intestinal fungal overgrowth. I mean, just a few years ago, I've been really heavily researched into the gut for such a long time, because when I had my breast implants in, my gut was constantly, I could never get rid of the parasites. It was like they were always there. And I imagine that there are things that impair the vagal tone, and we'll talk about that later. I imagine breast implants would be one of them. But what I've seen is that over the years, doing these labs, is that these clients and patients that come to you, patients that come to me, they've tried so many things with their conventional doctor. I want to walk people through the journey of what that looks like before we get to this point, right? Because we're going to talk about solutions and everything later. But I want people to also see that there are a lot of you out there, and you're doing your best to try to understand, like, oh, I've got stomach acid, so they could take a proton pump inhibitor, and then that's decreasing their stomach acid. And so they think, okay, problem solved, but actually that could be the gateway to H. pylori. So what I'm asking is what is the issue? What is the issues where you're not seeing that in Western medicine, allopathic medicine, the doctors that we go see that are covered by insurance, that are doing, colonoscopies, and they're prescribing prescriptions, and they're cutting parts and polyps out. What is all of that? Why is that perhaps ignoring the root cause issue? And how can that be dangerous? And how could these medications actually be making things worse, especially acid reducing medications?
I think where a lot of the mindset of this really comes from is the idea of a pill for every ill, and the idea of the acute care model that works well in acute circumstances, but terribly when it comes to chronic conditions. The idea that we need one prescription that's going to fix everything, but then wait a second, there's side effects for that one, so we need to prescribe another one, and then we need to prescribe another one, and we go down that rabbit hole, which is a whole nother side of the thing. But if we go in with that mindset that what somebody's dealing with, that it's a chronic condition, if we say that issue has a single cause or a single reason, then that pill should be the thing that ends it. And really, we need to keep in mind that these chronic conditions are multifactorial. They do not have a single cause. It's not like a car accident that led to a broken bone, or a fall that led to a muscle tear, or whatever. It's not a single causative event and symptoms and signs that happen afterwards in a specific diagnosis. It's the reason why the ICD-10 codes are now 20,000 strong, which is just ridiculous to me.
Wow.
That we have 20,000 diagnoses that we can now code for on our systems. It's just ridiculous to think about these things. So that mindset is where these issues really come up. And so if we go and we say, okay, you've got reflux, or you've got an issue with your stomach, we're going to give you a proton pump inhibitor. What you're doing is you're saying that the only way that this possible issue could happen is because you have too much stomach acid. But you're not asking the question, well, why is there too much stomach acid? Or is it actually inflammation that might be leading to this? Is there something that's triggering an inflammatory process that's leading to that reflux, or leading to a lack of digestion being able to be concerned? And so this is where the conventional approach, I feel, misses the mark, and the functional approach and the holistic approach asks the question, well, if this is happening, well, why is it happening? Why in your case, why in this individual person's case is this happening? What are the things that happen in their past? What is their diet? What's going on from a nutritional standpoint? What's going on from a stress standpoint? What's going on in their life that might lead them to be more in a sympathetic state rather than in the parasympathetic state where we can thrive? Why are 70% of people in that state? And that, questioning that and going into that a lot deeper, is where functional medicine really thrives.
Absolutely. And I'd love for you to comment. I know that, earlier you said that the symptoms of having low stomach acid, which is the whole digestive chain, fails to optimally break down food and pull food into our own cells so that we can use it for food. Instead, it becomes the bug's food instead of the body food, and multiple other things, and congestion issues and constipation. So aside from those things, what are some of the dangers for taking PPIs instead of just addressing the root cause, which could be the vagal tone?
I think one of the biggest things is we think we're actually fixing it, but when we're not doing that, we're actually promoting a lack of breakdown of our food. And when we promote a lack of breakdown, we then allow our bodies to not get the nutrients that they need. We're essentially creating malnutrition by shutting down a natural process in our body that may not even be the root cause. So we assume that it's high stomach acid, but we're actually then saying, okay, well, we're going to shut down these proton pumps. But that's what H. pylori does. It actually shuts down the beta cells. It kills off those beta cells. I realize I'm going kind of down this rabbit hole of it's much,
I
but
promised
really
the listeners
think
we would.
it essentially is this question of, if you don't ask why it's happening, how can you ever know that you're giving the right treatment?
Yes. That's what I say in every one of my videos. If you don't ask why, then you'll never fly.
Yeah.
You just can't. And we have to get curious about these symptoms. And I say, my thing is that symptoms are self-love from the soul. And it's trying to communicate with you. It's not trying to harm you. It's trying to heal you. And so allopathic medicine, I don't know if you saw this BS. There was an article that was shared recently, Navaz. It was one of our fellow doctor friends in the Mindshare forum sent me this. And it said, like, stop questioning science. Stop doing your own research. Like, basically let us, the Western doctors do everything for you. And I just went, no wonder why so many of us are not asking questions and being curious, because we're literally taught to not listen to our bodies. And I think that's the biggest conspiracy of what's been happening the last 10 years. It's like, don't listen to your body. Don't trust your body. Stop touching your breasts. We've got this for you. We've got mammos for that. And it's like, so get curious, you guys. I mean, is that also a sign of poor vagal tone, that you may also not be asking questions and you might not be curious? Because there's brain fog associated with this too, right?
Yeah, my brother, funny enough, sent me an article this morning that there's devices now that are out there to help stimulate the vagus nerve through the skin of the ear. So there's an actual component of the vagus nerve that actually innervates the skin of the ear. And so there's these devices that have been coming out. And this one article that he showed me was a device on the ear that stimulates vagus nerve, now increases our adult ability to learn languages by 13%.
Whoa.
What it essentially does is it's shifting us into that parasympathetic state in significantly higher amounts. So what happens when we're in that parasympathetic state? We have to ask that question. Well, why are we now learning more? When we go into parasympathetic, what's actually happening is our blood flow actually increases to the prefrontal cortex, to our ability to learn and think and be in that conscious state. And so by being told to not question something, we're actually saying, stop using your prefrontal cortex. Go and send the blood just to the lizard brain, to the survival centers, and be in your sympathetic zone all the time. When we now start to actually be in parasympathetic, we then send blood flow to the brain areas where we can actually consciously think and become aware and start to actually connect with our bodies and understand and listen and learn. And now we have research showing that we have a 13% increased ability as an adult to learn languages because of that. Just amazing to me.
Wow, I bet that'll improve relationships for men and women, because we
100%.
speak totally different languages. I think it would also breed more compassion. I mean, when we're in fight or flight, all you're thinking about, I mean, we know this, is that our blood flow is sent to that lizard brain, and we're thinking about our own personal, selfish desires to survive.
Yeah.
We're not thinking about someone else. We can't be compassionate when we're in a state of crisis.
Yeah.
So I feel like that might be a big part of maybe even why the marriage divorce rate is so high too.
I can absolutely guarantee there's some correlation there for sure.
Yeah, it's related to so many things. So, I mean, if we can talk to, I also believe that we have, we're in civil war right now at the time of recording this. We are at a crisis state where we are divided, and people who don't want to think for themselves and those who think critically. I think that that's really this divide that's happening, is people who want to rely on an outside governing body to take care of them and be the end all be all answers. And there's people who really want to critically think and think for themselves. So would you say that that's somewhat accurate, that maybe the people who aren't thinking for themselves have poor vagal tone, maybe you're living more in fight or flight, and the people who are thinking for themselves are focusing on, maybe inadvertently, not even realizing it, they do have better and higher circulation for vagal tone and blood flow to the brain?
It's tough to say if there is a direct correlation there, but I will say there are a lot of really smart people that choose not to listen to their bodies, and they specifically are making a choice to not live in that parasympathetic zone, and to potentially just kind of give up control. And it's because we're actually scared that we do have control over our own bodies, our own cells. And because we don't yet know how to listen to our bodies, we haven't been taught for so many years, we were told not to listen to our bodies. We essentially are scared to learn something new. How many of us are willing to just say, oh no, I don't need to think about that because it doesn't matter to me right now? Well, I guarantee if we were to put our attention to learning mindfully what our body is trying to tell us, if we start to listen to the whispers that our body tells us, then when our body starts screaming, that's essentially what's happening. So many of us are going into that sympathetic zone for such a long time, to a point where we then have these thyroid conditions and autoimmunity issues and brain dysfunction and significant brain fog and challenges that we then can't overcome, or we are having so much trouble overcoming because we're just waiting for a diagnosis. We're waiting for somebody else to tell us what's wrong, when really, here's a great question for you. Who knows your body better than you? And the answer is nobody. You know your body better than anybody. I tell every single one of my patients that. I don't know your body better than you do. I need you to listen to your body. I need you to tell me what's going on, and I'm happy to help put the puzzle pieces together. But you're the one that's living in your body on a daily basis. So it really comes down to the conscious ability to mindfully and acutely listen to what your body's trying to say. And I think that's where a lot of us are then able to put the attention and say, okay, well, if this is what my body's trying to say, then maybe I'm going to question what the government's saying, because for whatever reason, it just doesn't seem to fit with what I want.
Yeah. Every one of us has had those moments, right? Like for me, I was 21, 22 years old. I was playing professional soccer and I was getting UTIs all the time, urinary tract infections. And I went in, I don't want to keep taking antibiotics. I really want to get to the root cause. You're like, why is this happening? They're like, we don't know. And I said, well, what's my solution then? They said, take an antibiotic every day for the rest of your life. And I went, that just does not sound right. So there's some kind of a red flag that goes up where logic kicks in, intuition follows, and then you go on a quest to discover what's really going on. Yeah. And I think those are blessings when our body's screaming at us and we're taught not to listen. And then we're like, well, wait a second, I respect my voices. That feels very shamey to tell my body that it's doing this accidentally and that there's nothing else that you can do. It feels very defeating. And then also, like you said, to be put into one of 20,000 boxes, and then now we feel somewhat secure that, okay, they finally figured out what's going on. No, they just have some sort of strange diagnosis that's rare and a conglomerate of whatever other things that they've experienced before, but still nowhere close to the root, which the vagus nerve is such a big root, such a big freeway. So let's talk about some of these statistics too, of how many of us are struggling or suffering with poor vagal tone and just don't even know it, and what percentages of maybe things you can share scientifically of what that affects.
I believe that there is a very, it's a spectrum that we all kind of live on. And it's not like we're in one state or in the other state. We very much shift between the two. It's a matter of how often are we staying in the sympathetic versus the parasympathetic, and how easily can we shift our state. And yes, we can absolutely learn to shift our state. And it's honestly as simple as 3 breaths. Okay. We'll talk about those.
Yeah. The
but I honestly think that the numbers are very similar to what Dr. Bruce Lipton actually brought up. That about 70% of us are living primarily in that sympathetic fight and flight state. And only about 30% of us are in that parasympathetic rest, digest, recovery zone. And I'd like to add in, it's not just rest and digest, it's recovery as well. We cannot recover when we're under stress. Where you send flow is where you send function. And if we are under stress, if we're under that sympathetic system, what we're doing is we're sending blood flow to the muscles of the arms and the legs so we can either run away or fight against whatever the threat is that we feel is coming on towards us. We then are sending the blood flow away from our digestive organs, from our prefrontal cortex, from all of the organs to help control inflammation, and the liver to ensure that we're getting rid of toxins correctly, and all of those other things. Where you send flow is where you send function, and your state dictates where that flow is really going.
Mm-hmm. Your mental emotional state.
Yes, absolutely.
Just like go ahead.
Parasympathetic, sympathetic state as well.
Right. What I just want to clarify this because I've heard it a couple different ways. Is it that 70% of us are in fight or flight, or is it that the majority of us are in fight or flight 70% of our day? Which, because I've heard it said a couple different ways.
I think it's actually both, and it's it's probably about 70 to 80% of us are in sympathetic mode 70 to 80% of the time, and that's where the problem lies.
Wow.
I think it's actually supposed to be almost the exact opposite, that we should only be in sympathetic mode about 10 to 30% of the time at absolute maximum. We should not feel like we're threatened all the time. Mm-hmm. We should feel calm, relaxed, rested. If you go and look in the blue zones, right? These are great areas to look at. I don't know if you're aware of what the blue zones are, but there's 6 areas around the world where they have the highest number of centenarians in the world, the highest number of people that live to the age of 100 or higher. And if you go to these zones, they do not live under stress at all. They're calm, they're relaxed, things are working out for them. Loma Linda, California, there's one in Italy, there's one in Greece, in Okinawa, Japan. I forget where the other 2 are.
Costa Rica, there's one in Costa Rica. Yeah, close to where I visit.
And for me, like that is the ultimate sign of the type of state that we should be in, where our life expectancy in North America is still in the 60s and late 70s or early 70s. We're not hitting these areas. And now our life expectancy is coming down.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy again?
I
know.
And now,
right? How many of us are on chronic health medications and on medications for the rest of our lives, and all of these challenges? These are signs that things are just not working the right way, that we're starting to shift our lives so much into that sympathetic zone. We're not able to really focus on what really matters. And what really matters is being able to enjoy the company of others, choosing to eat real food, right? Mm-hmm. I believe, though, the words that came out of there were eat real food, not too much, mostly plants.
Mm-hmm. Michael Pollan.
It makes so much sense to me, right? You want to have something to believe in, whether it's some sort of spiritual or religious belief, or just a belief that the universe has something in store for you. The idea that you have something to work for, and having family and laughter and being able to be in an enjoyable space. Those are all characteristics of these blue zones. And that's a characteristic of being in that parasympathetic zone 70% of the time where possible. Yeah.
Instead of the opposite. So let's talk about I just want to kind of fire a few things at you specifically regarding, people who are struggling and suffering with certain types of issues. Like, we have a lot of women, obviously, who think or programmed to believe, and sometimes intuitively get hits that, it's my hormones. Like, it must be my hormones. And you know the deal. They go to the doctor, they go to endocrinologists. The journey is they start with what's covered by insurance. There's something wrong. I think it's my hormones. Okay, let's do some lab testing. And they're like, yeah, everything looks normal. Then a few years later, they go back and it's like, oh, okay, well, your TSH is off and your T3, and let's give you some Synthroid. And then something else is going on, and they give them birth control. Then something else goes on, and they're on antidepressants. And then before you know it, they're on a conglomerate of 5 things, including sleep medications, and they don't know how they got there. So that's all hormonal, of course. So what is it that the vagal tone is trying to tell us that is hormonally related, and how that can influence the hormones? I hear you say thyroid earlier, as well as autoimmune disease. So just go ahead and riff on that one.
Yeah, great place to go for sure. The vagus nerve is so involved in gut health, but it's also really involved in the function of and control of the immune system. And the immune system, we have 70% of our immune cells by volume located in the lining of the gut, in what's called gut-associated lymphoid tissue. And what happens is we either have foods that can trigger what's called leaky gut, right? Intestinal hyperpermeability, or we have these bacteria that are backed up or dysbiotic within our gut that are going to break down the gut lining and trigger an immune response. And when that happens, what happens is we are then overburdening our liver with toxins that need to be immediately or as quickly as possible eliminated from our body. And what we're doing is we're increasing toxic burden. Now, I like to point out that the liver plays a major, major role in all control of all hormones. It is, I like to think of it like the conductor of the orchestra. All the hormones, all of the blood sugar balance, all of the things that come into the body essentially need to go through the liver first and needs to be controlled through the liver. And if the conductor can't do his job, then what's going to happen? One hormone's going to go off over there. One hormone's going to go off over there. And we start to notice issues. And so, okay, thyroid issue over here, adrenal issue over here. But really where the challenge is asking that question, well, why is this happening? Why is this happening? And the question tends to lead to the answer of the liver is burdened, and it's because something is going wrong in the gut, because we have what's called our portal vein system that sends blood flow from the gut to the liver first. So everything that comes into the body first goes through to the liver and gets filtered out. And if the filter can't function, then the toxic burden is too high, and we then lead to issues with hormones showing up as problematic. And we then have issues with estrogen balance and progesterone and fertility issues and all of these other challenges. But really the problem is toxic burden on the liver.
God, I talk about that so much in all my programs. It's, I'm no specialist in any one specific thing, but everything's connected to everything. 70% or so of thyroid hormones converted from T4 to T3. And so when people come to me and say, oh, I'm on all these medications for thyroid, and I've tried to work with my iodine balance, and like, well, what work has your doctor helped you with the liver or toxicity or the gut? Like, none. So I believe that we have to, like you said, it's an orchestra. It's a whole symphony. And different things are regulating different things. So it's important to go to the root of why something is impaired to begin with. Yes, exactly. So, really question the medications that you're on, and if it's even necessary to be on these toxic medications, which many of them have a lot of petroleum-based things in them and are causing high levels of xenoestrogens, which are destroying your estrogen balance also. So it's absolutely critical to consider, what can I do, rather than just taking a medication or a pill for every one of these 20,000 ills, like you say.
Exactly.
So,
and I think that this is where vagus nerve balance can come in and actually play a vital role in some of the specific exercises and tools that you can do, that each person can individually do very easily with little to no cost to you at all. And essentially what they do is they promote the vagus nerve to turn on the anti-inflammatory functions that it has. So the vagus nerve controls what's called the cholinergic anti-inflammatory system using the neurotransmitter acetylcholine. Now, what it does is it uses this neurotransmitter to essentially put the brakes on the immune system, on the inflammatory system. So it controls inflammation. So if inflammation is showing up because there's a high level of toxic burden, or there's too much challenge in the liver, we have this inflammation reaction that's occurring. We need something to control that. So essentially the inflammation is pushing the accelerator. The brakes are from the vagus nerve.
And acetylcholine?
Control, exactly. And acetylcholine is that specific function to do that. And so that's the neurotransmitter used by the vagus nerve. So if we can keep that inflammation under control because we have good vagus tone, then we tend not to get into these issues of chronic health challenges. But where our vagus tone goes down, the inflammation levels can go up. So we don't have enough strength to push the brakes, the inflammation starts to rise. And that's where we get into these inflammatory conditions, hormonal imbalance type issues, autoimmunity, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes, and 95% of disease is rooted in inflammation. So this is why, everyone, I brought him on today, because this is the root. And so many people are taking non-steroid anti-inflammatory drugs, and what that does is it actually will drop your immune system response, which is something called secretory IgA on your stool panel. And I've been seeing this one as an epidemic too, where people's secretory IgA is either on massive response because it's it's on high alert trying to clear some sort of trigger or antigen or toxin out, or it's like me when I got my breast implants. Before I did, this was the biggest one. I cried when I saw my GI map, and my secretory IgA when I got it back, Navaz, was 44.
Oh my goodness.
And it's the second lowest I've ever seen. You know, optimal is like 1200, 1500. And I went, I got to get these boobs out of me, you know, these things that are just causing that fight or flight reaction.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about toxic beauty. We'll talk a little bit about blood sugar, because I know it's a big thing right now for this whole crisis that we're in, because it puts us in a higher state of disease. And then we'll start talking about solutions. So toxic beauty, we've got Botox, we've got breast implants, we've got a lot of toxins that women are applying to their body, their face, their hair, their nails, you know, all in the name of beauty. And my thing is that we're literally dying to be beautiful. And there is a term called drop dead gorgeous for a reason. And I do believe there's a big part that all this toxic beauty plays in dropping our vagal tone and increasing inflammation. So can you comment on any and all of that, like Botox and breast implants, more specifically, just toxic beauty in general?
Yeah, 100%. So we know the mechanism by which Botox works is actually to shut down acetylcholine production in the muscles. And so the way that it does that is when we inject it specifically into specific areas, we're trying to shut down those muscles from being able to create the wrinkles in the face. And so it flattens it out. But remember, acetylcholine is not just a neurotransmitter for the muscles and to promote muscles from shutting down, but it's also the neurotransmitter that is used in the vagus nerve. And so if we're essentially creating a mechanism in our body to shut down acetylcholine production and not allow acetylcholine to do its job, then are we not then allowing inflammation levels to come up because we're shutting down the ability for the cholinergic anti-inflammatory system to work? So this is where Botox can play a major role in this. Breast implant illness is a real thing, and it's just specifically adding to that toxic burden that's on the rest of the body. And when we bypass the liver's ability to detoxify by simply placing them into our bodies past any of the controls that we have, we're actually putting like toxic load directly into our body, and that allows it to leach out. What it is it's then past the liver, and it's a burden on the rest of the body. So the other cells of the body then take on this challenge of trying to eliminate this toxin, and those cells are not necessarily built to take on that challenge, where the liver really is. So there's different mechanisms by which a lot of the things that we have out there for the idea of superficial beauty that might actually create this toxic burden and this toxic load. And it then goes down this path of just kind of to look a little bit better, we are actually hurting ourselves significantly and not allowing our bodies to function at a very high level. I think what beauty truly is trusting that your body does what it needs to do, that your body has all of the tools, all of the specific things that it needs to do the job that it needs to do. Your job is to give it the environment, the nutrition, the tools, and the lack of stress that it needs to thrive. And for me, that's what true beauty is. It's not just on the outside. It's very much biochemically and psychologically on the inside.
Dr. Navaz for president. For beauty president, that is. Because I agree, you know, it's what is beauty? And we're so brainwashed. And this is not to shame any of you out there, because I was you. I've been doing these things too. I still have the mentality, and I still have to fight this off, that beauty really is on the inside. So it's a lot of deconditioning and deprogramming from what we've been taught. And I really, truly believe that beauty is from the inside, optimizing our cells function. And so that we can be more beautiful on the outside because we're giving the body what it needs. So amen to that. Last question before we start getting the solutions is blood sugar balance. You know, we've got metabolic inflexibility for 88% of the population now, which is said to be one of the number one risk factors for contracting viruses, diseases, and more morbid conditions. So can we talk about the vagus nerve's play and role in that? Yeah,
100%. Where the vagus nerve plays a major role in our ability to control our diet, to control our intake of nutrients and calories, is actually in the leptin and ghrelin responses in our bodies. So these are two major important hormones that are required in the ability to feel satiated by our meals and to stay satiated afterwards. So to be able to say, no, I'm done, I'm not going to finish off the last 10 bites of that meal, or to be able to say, no, I'm not going to pull out that snack because I'm not super hungry. So the leptin and ghrelin response plays a role here. And what it has to do with is how much our stomach is expanding, how our genetic and hormonal capacity to actually hear what our body is saying there and learning how to interpret those pieces of information. So I've gone through these challenges myself. This is what actually brought me into the realm. Is I used to weigh 250 pounds, had high blood pressure, high blood sugar, borderline diabetes. Like I was on that same trajectory of becoming diabetic before I was 30. I had all of those same kind of things coming up that I was going to lead down this path and have my heart attack by 48 and gone. And I just don't want that to happen. I don't want that to happen to me. I don't want that to happen to my kids. I don't want my daughter to have to go through the same challenges that I'm going through. I want to teach my future children at the time how to never deal with the challenges that I had to deal with. And so that's what drove me to figure out, well, this is why these challenges are happening. And so I found through genetic testing that I do have impaired leptin and ghrelin response, meaning that I have to listen far more strongly to what those hormones are saying. And I need to do more work on my vagus nerve so that I can actually hear what those hormones are saying and give them an opportunity to talk and give them an opportunity to be heard. And so that's where I started to notice these big changes. So that's where I lost 75 pounds, got rid of all of those health challenges, addressed the root cause of these challenges. For me, it was a yeast overgrowth in my gut, a specific type that I found, again, through GI map testing. Mm-hmm. And it allowed me to figure out the root cause, and then now to go out and share that with everybody, to be like, let's figure out what's really causing these challenges, rather than say, this is the problem, here's a solution, go for it, and kind of get onto this hamster wheel of not really going anywhere with regards to health.
So chronic Candida can also be related?
It wasn't Candida for me. It was Geotrichum yeast, funny enough. Geotrichum was the one that did it for me. Yeah, and that was leading to a lot of my sugar cravings. Right. And it's just all yeast overall that can do something along those lines.
And so improving...
And my desire for dopamine as well.
Yeah, right. Well, desire for dopamine would be, shopping addiction or food addiction or whatever addiction, something that just keeps you feeling like you're energized, right? So, I still have chronic Candida showing up. I still have that even after my breast implant. So could that, and a lot of people do, that's also vagal tone related as well?
Yeah, there's absolutely a role played there with vagal tone, and it's not a direct correlation. It's not like yeast play a role on vagus tone, but it's adding to the toxic load. It's adding to the burden. It's adding to the leakiness. It's adding to all of the challenges that the vagus nerve then has to deal with.
Yeah, gosh, it's systemic. Okay, so this is systemic. I mean, kidney regulation, electrolytes, water balance. I mean, when I read all the things you talk about that are, here are the symptoms of poor vagal tone, I went, whoa, and I got to have this guy on the show. Like this guy's getting to the root. I thought I was at the roots. This guy's like at the root down here. Because we're talking about physical, I say two things, toxins and trauma are the big things that then bring on infections and things like that. But this is such a big part. It regulates all those things, right? How much you can eliminate toxicity, what you're exposed to, what stays, what goes, your ability to handle trauma, all of it's related to that. So let's start getting to some of the solutions because, hormones, gut issues, mental, emotional, spiritual challenges, fight or flight, all the things we talked about today. Now we're talking about this one specific thing. So these solutions we'll talk about are things that you can do at home on your own. I highly recommend that you grab his book, but let's start talking about some of the biggest, heavier hitters that people can do that are, like we talked about earlier, that are small hinges that swing big doors.
Yeah. So the number one recommendation that I make, and this is something that works for so many people. I've gotten so many requests from people who've read my book to just be like, why does this work? And I've explained it a million times. So I love to talk about it, but it's breathing. Breathing is the key to making this whole thing work. How many of us breathe correctly? I can answer that question. It's very low. Yeah. We don't actually know how to breathe correctly. We've forgotten. Have you ever watched a baby breathe? watch what's actually happening. Are they raising their chest? Are their traps going up and down, or is it all belly, right? The answer is it's all belly. Lay them down, watch what they do. You'll see that belly rising up and down. And that's diaphragmatic breathing. That's breathing the way we were meant to breathe, not the way we're now programmed to breathe, where we can't let the belly out at all. We got to have this flat belly, so we got to breathe through here. I can guarantee about 80 to 90% of your clients have very tight shoulder muscles, traps, upper back muscles. That's because we're using those as our primary breathing muscles when they're meant to be accessory breathing muscles. So here's a really simple exercise. Put one hand on your chest, put one hand on your belly, and take 3 deep breaths. And then keep an eye on which hand is moving. Is it the top hand or the bottom hand?
Well, I'm a yoga teacher so I know this one, but I've been practicing it more. But yeah, a lot of people are elevating the higher one because they're not breathing through the belly.
We're noticing that the chest is the one that's going up and down, then we're using our chest muscles to breathe where we really should be using our diaphragm. And that's a really important factor because we think diaphragm breathing correctly. That's important there. But what else does the diaphragm do? What's right below the diaphragm? All of our abdominal organs, our liver, our stomach, our gallbladder, our intestines, they're all right there. So when the diaphragm is actually going up and down, creating that vacuum in the liver, it's actually also massaging and creating physical movement inside the abdominal organs. And that is how we can create a sense of peristalsis, a sense of proper detoxification and pushing stuff out. And we can actually push SIBO out. And we can actually allow constipation to stop happening because we're actually allowing movement to occur below the diaphragm. That is huge. So don't just breathe for your lungs using your diaphragm, breathe for your entire body, for your abdomen, for your organs using your diaphragm. There's a great video I show in one of my webinars that literally has the diaphragm going up and down, and you see all these organs underneath getting massaged and moved underneath. It's amazing.
Okay, awesome. Send that to me. I'll put that in the show notes.
We will definitely.
Yeah, it's when you said something earlier about a lot of people don't breathe proper Buddha belly, because is it the perception of, oh, I don't want to look fat, I got to have a flat belly? Is that mainly why people don't do it?
I think that's one of the main drivers. We've been taught to not allow that to happen. And we watch people around us, and the people that we find looking attractive or whatever have these flat bellies. They're not allowing the belly to go in and out. I feel like that's a major driver to what's going on. In addition to that, we now handle a lot more stress when we're younger. So we learn to breathe with our stress muscles a little bit differently. And because of that, we're in that mode so much more often.
Mm-hmm. Okay, awesome. And so I'll link that on how to breathe. I talk about this in our programs. I've got yoga nidra in there reminding people how to breathe, and then like, but I can't sit still or quiet because I've got all these thoughts that come in. And I'm like, well, you got to face your pain, and you got to, on the other side of this pain is usually where people find their parasympathetic. So it doesn't haunt them anymore.
One of the best ways to kind of keep an eye on this is watch some of the best performers in the world, not just singers, but athletes and stuff like that. Watch what they do under high pressure. So watch Beyonce on stage or Mariah Carey on stage. Watch what they do when they're going down for one of those really big notes. Do you see their shoulders rise? The answer is no. They're using their diaphragm. They're breathing that way. When you see a baseball player come up who, like, for example, Mike Trout, one of the best baseball players on the planet, stands up and literally looks like he's the most calm person on the planet because he's breathing calmly, he's breathing correctly, and he's allowing himself to perform at a very high level. So watch the really high performers out there that do the job that they need to do at the very highest level. You'll be able to see the differences between them and people that don't perform necessarily as high, and it's because they feel the stress more than those who are at the highest level.
Yeah. I played pro soccer, and I was definitely, back then, you can't think about breathing when you're on the field. It just happens like at nature. Yeah. And then now that I have I wouldn't say a desk job, but we're all kind of at a desk job now, being at home under COVID. But it's like there's a lot more sitting involved, and there's a lot more of that fight or flight type of breathing happening because we're more under stress in front of computers and things. So cool. Okay. What other things would you recommend on how to improve vagal tone?
So there's a few different muscles that are also innervated by the vagus nerve, and I think using them is really, really important. So the muscles at the back of the throat are actually innervated by the vagus nerve, and the muscles around the vocal cords specifically. And so using those is really key. Only about 3% of the information on vagus nerve goes to these muscles, but it plays a huge role when you're able to use these. So the reason I have any pitch or tone in my voice right now is because my vagus nerve is strong enough to send signals to these muscles to pull and stretch the vocal cords according to how high I want my voice to go. So I can go really, really low, or I can go really, really high because I have that ability to create pitch and tone because of my vocal cords. So what you can do is start to practice some sort of humming or chanting or singing, something along those lines. So let's say you're commuting to work or you're sitting at home by yourself. Pump up some music and just belt it out. Like, start to use those muscles. How many of us, our throat chakras and our ability to talk are just down? We just don't feel heard. It's a lot of that kind of contributing to vagus nerve dysfunction and not allowing us to thrive and actually get our voices heard. So go out and hum before a meal. I get my daughter to do this. I have a 3-year-old daughter. Every so often, she's getting a little bit extra riled up. What I'll do is I'll have her hum for 30 seconds. We'll all sit there at the table. We'll go, She finds it hilarious. She's laughing through this whole thing. So humming with us. And what it does is it just calms her right down. And it gets her into this parasympathetic rest digest state so she can then eat this food properly and actually break it down correctly because her mode is now in rest and digest.
Oh, that's cool. It's kind of like a digestive enzyme. It's like
exactly.
It's like preparing to digest is little oming or whatever sounds you want to make.
Om, actually, one of those reasons, Om is a specific thing that the tone that you go into Om with, where you go really low, is actually very much stimulating those muscles. It's actually really cool.
I miss oming in person with all my yoga classes.
Yes,
I used to teach it, so we used to om all the time. And when I traveled through India, I was just like mandatory. You have to om, and I'm like, I love this mandate. Yeah. So people who have is one of the symptoms who start. When I had 3 surgeries last year, I had 2 Achilles tendon surgeries, and I ruptured right after my breast implant removal. And I started noticing when I was taking the opioids that it interfered with my throat box. I felt like my voice was softer and weaker. Is that poor vagal tone when you hear people then have like, not soft, but maybe like weak voices? And they can't really.
Just can't belt.
Yeah.
Because the muscles just don't have the tonicity in them anymore. And when we have low muscle tone, it's actually not the muscles that are low in tone, it's the nerves that are innervating those muscles. And so it's really important to look at that. The control of the nerves is where the issue comes in. And that's where opioids can have their effect specifically, is on shutting down nerve function or decreasing slowly the nerve function. So that's why you're not able to belt.
Yeah. I felt that. I thought, why does my voice change when I take opioids? What's up with that? Yeah. That really makes sense. And opioid crisis, a lot of people on NSAIDs and everything too. Does that also affect the NSAIDs?
Nothing specific on NSAIDs, but it wouldn't surprise me if there was.
Yeah. Okay. So I know you have a lot of things in your book. I'm just listing out a few things in the article, like other things that you want to talk about in depth, and you can roll with however many other ones. We're starting to run out of time. Cold showers, singing or chanting. Yeah. And the rotation, gargling, yoga, meditation, deep breathing exercises, laughter, probiotics, a light exercise, fasting, massages, tai chi, fish oil, tongue depressors, acupuncture, serotonin, tensing stomach muscles, eating in relaxed state, chewing your food well. There's a lot of things. So whichever ones you want to take for the last few minutes of this and elaborate on that are the biggest ones that, in addition to what you just mentioned, would be great. And then I'll send them to your book.
I love cold showers. I think cold showers are one of the most underrated things that we can do. We tend to want to be really warm and comfortable in a shower.
Yes.
What happens with a cold shower is it stimulates a couple different things. If you've ever heard of Wim Hof and the Wim Hof method, what Wim Hof himself has done is essentially he is the complete master of his vagus nerve. He can put himself into a parasympathetic state enough that he can walk up a mountain, like literally climb up Everest wearing shorts and boots and not experience it. What the cold is stress. And what he's learning or trained himself to do is to handle said stress. And so anytime a stressor comes up, like for example, when he was voluntarily injected with bacterial endotoxin into his bloodstream, something that should theoretically have killed him, he was able to overcome it, right? Because he was able to say, okay, here's a stressor. Let me hyperactivate my vagus nerve and put myself into this anti-inflammatory state and get my immune system functioning well enough to get rid of these things while still putting the brakes on where I need to. So not allowing it to overdo it for me. Cold showers are exactly that. It's a way to train your body to handle stress. And I've been able to learn how to do this for myself 3, 4, 5 times a week, depending on my exercise or whatever I'm doing during the week. Like I go for a really long bike ride, for example, 60 miles, 100K. I'll come back, I'm completely warm and exhausted, and a cold shower just lights me right back up. Because now it's a way to handle stress, but also cool my body temperature down. So it's a constant, like it's a great tool to help just shift your state and teach you how to breathe calmly under stress.
Mm-hmm. That's a good one. I am so averse to cold showers. I know how good they are for us, but even now that you just said that, I'm probably going to do it more, just stick it through. I have circulation issues, and I always have had circulation. Cold hands.
That's where this might not work out, where circulation issues is a bit of an issue. We don't want to necessarily go down that path. So doing cold is good, but not necessarily going into the ice bath kind of realm. Bath.
Yeah, I mean, because circulation issues could also be an issue with vagal tones too. So if you're if you're working on improving your vagal tone, then maybe you could titrate.
You should improve it, exactly.
Yeah. I've had cold extremity issues since I was 17, and I've always thought I've got a thyroid problem, and the doctors are like, your thyroid numbers are fine. And turned out I self-diagnosed Hashimoto's hypothyroidism, and then I reversed it. So, but I'm still on the other side of why do I have circulation issues? Is this lymphatic? Is lymphatic and vagus nerve related too?
Yeah. So. There's a bit of research on it. Lymphatics play more of a role in terms of movement and being able to be in an active state. When we're active, we're pumping muscles and creating lymphatic drainage and allowing things to go out. And what happens is it's more on a toxin buildup issue. So where lymphatics come into play is when we're not moving, we're building up toxins, and it's actually slowly backing up the detoxification pathways. And that's where it can affect the vagus nerve specifically.
Yeah, I mean, everything's connected to everything. So it's always hard to say, well, which one of these things is it? So I'm guessing that for those listening who are like, okay, well, I want to go see if my vagus nerve is the problem. Is there a doctor they can go to, or is there someone that can test for this that can say, oh, it's definitely your vagus nerve? Is there like blood testing, or is there something that you have that can help with that in the book or otherwise?
Even better than blood testing and going to your doctor is getting to find out what your heart rate variability is. Your heart rate variability is the average number of milliseconds between beats of your heart measured over a period of time. It's better than heart rate at telling us what's going on with your vagal tone, and it's essentially a measure of your recovery state and a direct measure of your vagus nerve innervation to your heart. And the higher your heart rate variability, the higher number of milliseconds you have, the better your vagus nerve is functioning. That's the best way to test it. And so there's a few amazing tools out there that I recommend to people, and more coming out every day as tech kind of booms. So the Oura Ring is a wonderful, wonderful tool.
Just wrote that down. Yeah.
Sitting upstairs. So I love my Oura Ring. It measures essentially my HRV overnight, tells me what my average is, what my maximum is. And I can essentially tell myself, based on how high my HRV is, how hard I can push myself that day. And if it's really low because I had a really crappy sleep, or my daughter climbed into bed and was kicking me all night, or whatever it was, that is a sign that I need to take it easy. Whereas if my HRV gets up into the 60s and 70s, then I know, okay, I can push myself today, and I can go and do a really long bike ride, or I can go and push myself on my Peloton, or whatever it is. So these are great measures of what's going on there. There's another great tool called the Elite Hrv Tool. I've got it kind of right here. The Core Sense tool from Elite Hrv. Essentially, it's just, you wake up, you put your finger in it, and it measures it on your phone. Really, really awesome tool. Same idea, it just doesn't get the length of time that the Oura Ring gets. I love the Oura Ring because it gets however long you're sleeping. It's also a sleep tracker, which is great. And HeartMath is another really, really great tool to help you train yourself to get into coherence. I love the HeartMath Inner Balance tool that's a really easy like Bluetooth connection to your phone, and it'll track what's going on and the ability to get into a state of what's called coherence, where your heart rate variability, your heart rate and your breath rate are all synced up, and you get into this awesome state of coherence, getting into this calm zone, recovery zone really, really easily.
Awesome.
It's a wonderful training tool.
I'm going to have them on very soon. So that perfectly correlates with this.
Wonderful.
And we'll get, into some deep solutions there. And I really love the Oura Ring and all of these because you don't have like an Apple Watch that's got EMFs that are interfering into your body and causing more.
It's wonderful for that. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Okay. I think that's enough to get them really excited about the vagus nerve. Whether you're a science geek or not, this applies to you and could be the big mystery as to why you have so many issues and you've tried so many things and you still haven't been able to nip it in the bud. So anything that you'd like to share at the end of this, like any encouragement that you have for them, any case studies that you've heard with patients that you've worked with that felt like they could not get any farther and then they came to you and then we just did some things with the vagus nerve and then here's their life now and it's all changed.
Yeah, I'll give one really great example. I had a friend of my wife's actually who was dealing with significant chronic IBS, constipation, really, really bad. And it would shift into like the occasional like week of terrible diarrhea, and it would just shift back and forth. And essentially she was so depressed because of it. It wasn't allowing her to live her life the way that she wanted to. Having trouble in relationships. She had like issues with like psychological stress in accordance to this, and just being able to find herself and be comfortable being herself. And she finally reached out. I don't like to push myself on people and say, hey, come work with me. I like to say, hey, if you're ready, come chat with me. And so she finally did. She reached out and she said, hey, I need your help. And I sat down with her. We got her testing done. We figured out what was really going on. She didn't have a lot to find on the GI map. She had a couple of bacterial overgrowths, nothing incredibly major. But what was wrong was her vagus tone was really, really low. Her HRV levels were quite low. And so I said, the thing that's going to be the game changer for you is to start doing these exercises, cold showers, the gargling, the humming, deep breathing exercises, going to yoga, doing all of these great exercises to get your body functioning really well. And she messaged me a month later, feeling significantly better, having gone to the bathroom every day comfortably for the entire month. And it just shifted. It literally took her about a week to get these things going. And all of a sudden she was going significantly better. And now she was able to move from Toronto, where I am. She was able to move to England for a dream job. She was able to take on her dream job. She's now over there. She's dating. She's found a really nice guy. Like, things are just happening for her, and her health is just continuing to improve. And so for me, it's not about the challenge of what's wrong with your vagus nerve. It's not about what's going on with your gut or your inflammation. It's about what is it stopping you from being able to do in your life. And being able to make those changes for her was really the drive for me to say, I'm on the right path. This is the way that I can help people achieve the hope that they need to go out and do what it is that they want to do and impact the world that they want to impact.
Yeah, Navaz, thank you so much for that. I mean, it's just so commonplace and people are overwhelmed by it. Here's the GI map. Oh, well, bugs showed up, but not many of them, but we'll still go on 17 supplements and, just go on said protocol that everybody else gets. And that's the old model. It's not working. Even, the functional medicine experts out there I'm speaking to, including myself. That's why I brought him on the show, is because there's so much more to this picture. And I always just say, stay curious. Yes. Stay curious, because if you think you have it all figured out is the moment you stop learning, and is the moment that you're limiting yourself, your patients, your family, whoever it is. So stay curious, listen to your body, and go buy Dr. Navaz's book. I'll be linking it here for you guys, and I'll be also linking everything that he talked about in the show notes, some practices and things that you can do at home. Thank you again so much for the work that you've done. Thank you so much for suffering so that you could provide us our sovereignty, and for listening to the call to make this your life purpose work, because it's truly, truly impacting the world.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for this.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks, Warriors, for listening, and we will see you on the next show. If you have any questions from this one or any other show, dianekaiser.com/ask. And as always, please rate the show, review, subscribe, and share it with the world, especially this one, because this is a doozy. See you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to today's show. If this episode really tugged at your soul and you're ready to have your personal breakthrough, we would love to have a heart-to-heart with you to get you crystal clear on 3 things. What do you want? What's standing in your way? And how do we get you to your soul goal in the fastest time possible? Visit my site, dianekaiser.com/call to schedule your free 1-hour connection session with one of our warriors to map out exactly how you want to look, feel, and live. We've helped thousands of women warriors just like you all around the world free themselves from the symptoms and suffering they never thought possible. And you just might be our next success story. Talk soon.